The Arab migration to the East African coast during the 8th century was a significant historical event, setting the stage for centuries of cultural exchange, trade, and conflict. This movement was driven largely by the expansion of trade routes across the Indian Ocean, linking the Arabian Peninsula to the African continent. As Arab traders, explorers, and settlers ventured to the East African coast, they encountered a dynamic cultural landscape dominated by Bantu-speaking communities whose lifestyles, beliefs, and customs had developed over centuries in the region. The Arabs were primarily drawn to the coast by the lucrative opportunities in trade, including ivory, gold, tortoiseshell, and especially slaves, which were highly valued commodities in the markets of Arabia and beyond. The East African coast, stretching from modern-day Somalia to Mozambique, was strategically located along the monsoon-driven maritime trade routes, which allowed Arab seafarers to establish regular contact with the region. Key trading ports like Mombasa, Lamu, and Kilwa began to emerge as vibrant centers of commercial activity where Arab traders and Bantu-speaking locals could engage in economic exchange. Upon arrival, Arab settlers faced significant cultural resistance from the indigenous Bantu communities. These groups were primarily agrarian, with well-established traditions, social structures, and belief systems. Many adhered to animist spiritual practices and ancestral worship, which clashed with the monotheistic beliefs of Islam that the Arabs brought with them. The local Bantu leaders, who wielded authority over their communities, were cautious of the newcomers, perceiving them as potential threats to their established way of life. This resistance manifested in several ways. For one, the integration of Arabs into local societies was initially slow, as indigenous communities were hesitant to embrace their foreign customs, language, and religion. Many Bantu communities were skeptical of converting to Islam, seeing it as a cultural imposition. However, the Arabs were persistent in promoting their faith, often using marriage alliances as a strategy to integrate more deeply into the local society. By marrying into Bantu families, Arab settlers could gain social acceptance and political influence, which in turn facilitated the gradual spread of Islam along the coast. The cultural exchange that ensued was not entirely one-sided. While the Bantu-speaking peoples gradually adopted some elements of Arab culture, such as language, with Swahili emerging as a lingua franca that incorporated both Arabic and Bantu linguistic elements, the Arabs also adopted aspects of local customs. The Swahili culture that developed along the coast was a unique blend of Bantu and Arab influences, characterized by a distinct language, architectural style, and social practices. The construction of coral stone mosques, the use of dhow sailing vessels, and the practice of coastal trade became hallmarks of Swahili identity, marking a significant shift from earlier purely Bantu ways of life. Despite the eventual cultural fusion, the process was fraught with tensions. The Arab presence, especially as it grew in number, sometimes led to violent confrontations with the indigenous peoples, who resisted external influences in a bid to preserve their traditions and territorial control. In some areas, local leaders were forced to navigate complex relationships with Arab traders, balancing cooperation for economic benefits with efforts to maintain their own authority and cultural autonomy. The slave trade, which intensified with the Arab migration, was another contentious issue. Arabs established slave markets in various coastal cities, where captives from the interior were bought and sold. This practice was alien to many Bantu-speaking societies, which had their own systems of servitude that were often less harsh than chattel slavery. The introduction of the Arab slave trade therefore exacerbated tensions, as coastal societies became entangled in a trans-regional system that commodified human life on an unprecedented scale. This aspect of Arab migration left a legacy of social disruption that persisted long after the 8th century. Over time, however, as trade continued to flourish, some Bantu communities began to see the benefits of forging alliances with the Arab settlers. The exchange of goods brought wealth to coastal cities, leading to the rise of prosperous trading states, such as the Kilwa Sultanate, which by the 10th century had become a powerful city-state. These trading states were characterized by a cosmopolitan culture that embraced elements of both Bantu and Arab traditions. They played a crucial role in facilitating long-distance trade, not only within East Africa, but also with distant lands across the Indian Ocean, including Persia, India, and China. In conclusion, the Arab migration to the East African coast in the 8th century initiated a complex process of cultural resistance, exchange, and synthesis. The initial encounters were marked by friction as the Bantu-speaking communities sought to preserve their cultural integrity in the face of foreign influences. Yet, the dynamic interactions that followed led to the emergence of the Swahili culture, a unique blend of African and Arab elements that continues to define the East African coast to this day. The Arab migration left an indelible mark on the region, influencing its language, religion, architecture, and social structures, while also laying the groundwork for the trans-regional trading networks that would shape East Africa's history for centuries to come.